It's time to step out now, into cosmos, into mythos, into psyche.
When you witness a dark thought that isn't going to get you anywhere, you witness it and love it. You love your dark thoughts. Remember, the witness is part of the soul, and the soul loves everything. Everything, not every being, but everything. Loves the clouds, the trees, and the fish, and the animals. And that love coalesces the universe. Oneness of the universe is love.
Love those dark thoughts, my friends. Because if we hate them, they will ripple through the weird web, attracting others of a similar nature, adding weight to the cross that we already bear. This, I feel, is the Saturn work. It's our weird world with a Y, a place where all of our thoughts and actions are like karmic boomerangs. And if we can't handle the gravity of our circumstance, or our minds are spinning dark webs around our hearts, we might just be entrapping ourselves. So we must be clear in our aim of the high road, the path of the ibex, of the confident goat who does not panic when Pan screams upon waking from his dreams, creating pandemonium. We gotta know the ground state, our center, and be unwavering with our boundaries, with the universals of right and wrong in this weird world. So as I record this, the moon is with Saturn, really the entire boneyard, wrapping her empathic coils around all of them, hugs all around, in a way for us to hopefully better understand their true names. And it's also symbolic, I think, the weather outside. It's ripping with rain and wind here in Dartmoor. And so, some context, this is going to be the first of 4 shows that will be an attempt to understand the construction project, really, that is in Capricorn at the moment. And I also hope that you had a spirit-filled Hallows Eve as well and offered up some good prayers to those who have come before. And yeah, I say we get into it. So, if Saturn is the lord of this dimension, governing all time and karma, then when he's at home in Capricorn, domestic and domicile, his effect is that much the greater. And it's not going to go away anytime soon. After Cap comes Aquarius, a sign he also rules, which some of us, I think, forget this. So these are the times where there's somewhat of a wheel in motion, and that is going to keep spinning until March of 2023, when he finally moves into Pisces, getting his little tail wet once again. And so it's best we get acquainted and learn of the greatness of this god, because after all, he is the ruler of the Golden Age. How weird is that? And also, why weird? Okay? If you weren't with me along the weird road, if you're new to the show, I welcome you. But also, if you're still kind of unfamiliar around the concept of weird, that's WYRD. Weird is cause and effect that permeates the entire universe. It's the Celtic equivalent of karma, not to be understood as an extremely controlling fate, but rather as the natural consequences of one's actions. Each person really shapes their own weird. So there's also like family weird, national weird, that are all shaped by the actions of the group. Weird, therefore, does not control our lives. It just responds to our own actions. And it's this fundamental law that really governs our world. Quite the Saturnian idea, right? As an example, this is my weird world, woven from the threads I have provided by my past thoughts and actions. It is also your weird that has brought you here to this show to hopefully learn something new and old. That's this weird world, Saturn's domain. So in this show, we're going to get more familiar, of course, with Saturn and Capricorn, if you aren't already. He's been here since the winter solstice of 2017. And it will be, like I said, the first of 4 shows. We'll do the next one with Pluto, then we'll do one with K2, we'll do one with Jupiter as well, tying it all together. That will bring us, I think, to around January. And this whole project that is occurring in Capricorn, I've been referring to as the boneyard. You see, boneyards, to me, are peaceful places. Usually they're quite beautiful places as well, a bit macabre, but they're profound to visit and contemplate the ephemerality of life. Also our connection to the ancestors. It's quiet there, and we can wonder about the weird until our hearts are content. And this, to me, is a really healthy way of understanding this stellium, because it does seem that the crosses that we bear, or the ancestral line that is at our back, is ripe right now. And it's up to all of us to understand where this is happening in our lives, in our charts, so that we can really address it and heal the generations in both directions. 7 generations in both directions. So if at any point during this show you find yourself watching the melancholic fog lifting from your eyes, being able to see more clearly what Saturn is teaching you, consider this. Open your podcast app if you're not already in it. Also, if you updated your Mac computer, if you're on one, to Catalina, there is now a podcast app that is available in the new OS. So open it up, go to the show, consider leaving some stars or maybe a review. If that's too much work for you, you can also take it a little bit further and add another brick to the wall of this cathedral that this podcast, I suppose, desires to be, and go to Patreon. Patreon.com/AdamSummer, and you can support there at any of the pledge levels. It keeps the wind in the sails of the journey of this show. And just yesterday, I added a new pledge level at the 50, which gives you everything that I offer on there. The Patreon-only podcast, the weekly or the monthly parlors, the monthly classes, apprenticeship recordings, and then at the 50, we're going to have a monthly meetup with everyone who is watching the apprenticeship classes, and it will be a study group. So a bit advanced from the other parlor that we do at the 5 level. And so if you're interested in that, go on to patreon.com/AdamSummer. And if all of that is just too much weight to bear, just tell a friend about the show. Spin a weird web of good intention, and maybe it will help them too. And it will just ripple throughout the weird web of your life. And one final idea to get us situated before we move forward comes from Nassim Taleb. And he has this book of aphorisms titled The Bed of Procrustes, if that's how I pronounce it. And he explains the title thusly. Every aphorism here is about a Procrustean bed of sorts. We humans, facing limits of knowledge and things we do not observe, the unseen and the unknown, resolve tension by squeezing life in the world into crisp, commoditized ideas. Reductive categories, specific vocabularies, and prepackaged narratives, which on occasion has explosive consequences. Now, I fear that this show, really all of my shows, are such a bed. But know this, that I am always doing my best to find the language and the metaphors to help us bridge the gap between the known and the unknown, to help us to grok the influence of these celestial phenomena, to find those holes to heavens. This is my prayer. And so let's get into it. On the nature of Saturn, there's this great book by John Fraley called The Real Astrology. And I've been greatly enjoying it. It's kind of satirical, tongue-in-cheek, about traditional astrology. And it's a great read, I think, for any of us that are serious students of astrology. And in Chapter 7, he talks about the planets and their essences. And I think reading from the first paragraph is a good start to get us situated here. And so John writes, crucial to the whole concept of astrology, crucial both for accurate judgment within it and for understanding how it works, yet utterly disregarded by modern astrology, is the idea of essence. This idea does not fit the contemporary worldview, so modern astrologers, rather than stand firm to their knowledge, the very knowledge that is necessary to prevent their craft from truly the baseless superstitions that the skeptics proclaim it, have prostrated themselves before the false idol of modern thought. We use the term thought in its loosest possible sense, and cast aside the cornerstone around which the edifice of astrology and all traditional thought is built. This is not the place for technical splitting of philosophical hairs, so we shall paint with a broad brush and describe the traditional model of the world and all that is in it as looking somewhat like a fried egg. In the heart of each subject is its essence. All around it is accidental form. The classic image of essence is as the idea in the mind of the divine architect, the accidental form of which idea appears to us is as an object in the world. And of course he goes on throughout the chapter to explain why dignity is so important and how traditional forms of interpretation help us to really understand, or at least get close to the essence of what it is that we are studying. Because as soon as we name it, it's gone. And so if we were to choose a word for Saturn and Capricorn, it would be yin. It pulls it all together, an image appearing again from the divine architect's mind. And so she pulls it all in, the necessary elements as well to produce it. Capricorn is feminine, Saturn is cold, together as domicile. At home, Saturn condenses and manifests in a weird way our reality. And so there's this idea as well that I got from Rick Levine at the AA conference back in June. And I just loved it. As you know, I'm a Wyrd guy. And he talked about this concept of the symbol of Saturn. If you draw it, it's the cross of matter. And then you have the crescent of soul that comes down from it. It's also the flip of the Jupiter symbol. But like if you add the crescent, but flip it to the bottom, you have an S. And so you have an S and you have a T. And the idea here is that all words with ST in it relate to Saturn. So astrology is one of those words. Podcast is one of those words. Saturn, Satan, sit, stern, stoic. I think you get the idea. And so if we were to play around with it, we could come up with something like, it's so striking when you string strong words like the old stoic man sits in silent stillness at the site where his stepsister once sat with stars and constellations, singing and staring past the blast of the start of all things, studying the structure of his thoughts, stained from the last fast where his straight path turned into a strange path, when his strength got stronger as he made lists of his thanks and began to listen to the stories of strangers, and stole nothing but trustworthy stones from sacred sites to help him construct his new life. Stellar, isn't it? Staggering, really. This hopefully got us closer to the essence of Saturn, steeped in the boneyard. Saturn in Capricorn, to me, is equal parts construction and destruction, mist and systemistica, the cruelest and the gentlest, the worst and the bestest. You get the gist? Trust it. Study it. It's the shit. ST words. Play around with this and see when you say these words like skeleton or study, the ones that I have used, it gets us closer and closer to the essence of Saturn when he is at home, when he is at his strongest, when his feet are kicked up and the weird is playing its part in all of our lives, right? Like another example, one from a wonderfully weird friend here in Dartmoor. She says, carnality is the realm of Saturn, but a star-steeped carnality, a skin suit of existence that bristles with spirit. Or how about this one from my dear love?
Saturn's timeless test still stands, assisting us to transcendence, a secret selection between two faces to steer our earthly presence. One is that of Satan, the other the sacred light. One is the master of ascension, the other the master of spite. Each one has a secret closet darkened to us all. In one there is a skeleton, the other a pedestal. History shows our ancestors selected the first of the two. In system structures, constitutions, they stirred their fateful stew. They utilized strength for destruction, for science and material gain. They saw without sight and felt without heart, until only bones remained. With scythes they lay to waste the ancient mystery schools. In stubbornness they starved centuries with unjust and stoic rules. The deconstructed death of man is Satan's dystopic state. So let us study from history and select a different fate. With foresight let us reconnect with Saturn in our chart and settle on the path to spirit that we veered from at the start. In conscious sensitivity we must place our trust, creating a supportive system that is fair and true and just. Then in astute and silent discipline we flow with unconscious thought. The mystic mind takes over and we find what it is that we sought. The other door stands open, and resolute in our goals, we climb up spirit's pedestal and truly bear our souls. We lose concept of the physical and all our earthly scars, and step upon the stairway to the string of stolen stars. Astrology contains the mysteries and reconstructs the steps. The chart is our soul signature, and Saturn the final test.
Or we could even turn our gaze to T.S. Eliot. He's got that flip, S-T, but the T-S. And he writes, "Do I dare disturb the universe? We shall not cease from exploration. In the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go." Just wistfully, I am cutting right there and pasting quotes from T.S. Eliot. But quite the studious fellow, and it is my hope that that struck a chord in you, and that those strings in your soul have been stoked. That also, there's this idea of story, one of my favorite ST words, that can really help us to understand the essence really of anything that we are interested in, but especially these planets. And so the beautiful lady you just heard reading her ST like limerick, her father wrote this great book called Astrology in Ancient Mesopotamia. And in it explores the gods, the planets, from really the origin, as far as back as we can go, as far as evidence is concerned. And so he writes about Saturn. Saturn and Mars, the divine brothers, were both warrior gods. While the planet Saturn, called Segush in the astrological letters, was never formally identified in the text with a deity, it is generally understood as a planet of Ninurta, also known as Ningirsha, Nindib, or Nanurash. Maybe that's how we pronounce them. In fact, Saturn and Mars were in such close alliance that the Babylonians and Assyrians sometimes declined to identify them separately. An example of this celestial congruence appears on a relief that archaeologists excavated at the city of Kish, the cult center of the war god. It shows the head of the war god flanked by the symbols of both Ninurta and Nergal, who's Mars, each of them depicted with a sun disk, for both also shared certain qualities of the solar deity. Ninurta's primary mythological role was that of the conquering hero who waged war on behalf of the gods. His story is told in myths so ancient that it certainly predates the appearance of writing. While many details of the story have not yet been reconstructed, the basic plot as we understand it is as follows. In ancient times, the eternal laws had been written by the gods upon the tablets of fate. Possession of these tablets conferred the power over fate upon the owner. Originally, they were held by Enlil, who wore them upon his breast. One day, at dawn, after Enlil had removed the tablets in order to wash, they were stolen. The thief was the winged dragon of storms called Su, who was in league with the great sea-dwelling dragon of chaos. Such was the fear instilled in the gods by these creatures that none was prepared to pursue them and fight for the necessary recovery of these vital tablets. Only Ninurta finally had the courage to step forward and volunteer for this formidable task. After a search, he located the nest of Su in the mountains and saw the tablets hidden within it. He managed to rescue the tablets and brought them back to the great meeting hall of the gods, where in gratitude he was awarded custody of the tablets. Thus, Ninurta became overseer of fate and destiny, known as we have seen as Shimtu to the ancient Assyrians. We could also say the overseer of Wyrd. Now that we have got the taste of the vast essence of Saturn, on to the structure of Capricorn. Saturn has been in his home sign of Capricorn since December 20th, the winter solstice of 2017, and will remain until he moves into Aquarius, his next sign over, on March 22nd of 2020. He will then drop back into Capricorn on July 2nd of 2020, and then finally secure his position in Aquarius on December 17th of 2020 as well. And will remain in these Saturn-ruled signs, like I said earlier in the show, until he moves into Pisces, which will be on March 7th of 2023. Now, there are a few glyphs of Capricorn that I'm sure you all are familiar with, and all of them are meant to depict the goat or the ibex. That the one I like, it's kind of like the symbol of Aries, and then you do the loop-de-loop and spin it down. Well, the loop-de-loop in all three of the glyphs is meant to be the tail of the sea goat, and then the first part of it is meant to be the horns of the goat. And one of the theories of the origin of the sea goat is that the ibex goes into rut around the winter solstice, so around the holidays, making love in these long nights. And so celebrations like Yule to Saturnalia to the many 12 sacred nights, I guess we always find a reason to celebrate, to bring fire into the lengthy and cold nights, to basically call the sun back to the earth. But anywho, I think it's time for a story, and there are many which account for the sea goat and how he came to pass. From Pricus, the son of Kronos, and all of his sea goat children who desired dry land, and when they came, they would lose their capacity to think and act, to Egipan, or Aegipan, if that's how you pronounce it, and his heroic clarion call that caused panic across the lands as Typhon came to destroy Olympus. But this is the scene that was just gifted to me. There he sits, tucked away between the sky and ground of the Nile Delta, reminiscing about the good old days with his father in those Arcadian pastures. The smell of goats and wildflowers, the scent of water nymphs and mythic wine warbling in the breeze. How he and Hermes used to get into all the right kinds of trouble. That is, before the day the storm came. The days when everything changed. He remembers that conversation he eavesdropped on between his harem of nymphs and that beet red grizzly of a man, Alabar, like it was read straight from a Tom Robbins novel. Pan is not well, the nymphs confided. But I watched him scale the rocks. I watched him set 4 of you to coming in a row, said Alabar. He seems fit enough for me. The nymphs released a chorus of dreamy sighs. You should have seen him when he was in his prime. He's like a sick dove nowadays, compared to the goat he used to be. Is it Christ he was making him weak? No, not Christ, but Christians. With every advance of Christianity, his powers recede, said one nymph. It started long before Christ, said the second. Yes, it did, agreed the first. It began with the rise of the cities. There simply was no place in the refined temples of Attica and Sparta for the mountain goat like Pan. A third nymph, who, with a wad of leaves, was scrubbing herself clean of cake secretions, joined in. It was man's jealousy of women that started it. They wanted to drive the goddess out of Olympus and replace them with male gods. Is it not Pan who is a male god? Asked Alabar. True, he is, but he is associated with female values. To diminish the worth of women, men had to diminish the worth of the moon. They had to drive a wedge between human beings and the trees and the beasts and the waters, because trees and beasts and waters are as loyal to the moon as the sun. They had to drive a wedge between thought and feeling, between lamplight by which they count the day's earnings and the dark to which our Pan is ever connected. At first they used Apollo as the wedge, and the abstract logic of Apollo made a mighty wedge indeed. But Apollo, the artist, maintained a love for women, Not the open, unrestrained lust that Pan has, but a controlled longing that undermined the patriarchal ambition. When Christ came along, Christ, he slept with no female, neither two-legged nor four. Christ, who played no musical instrument, recited no poetry, and never kicked up his heels by moonlight. This Christ was the perfect wedge. Christianity is merely a system for turning priestesses into handmaidens, queens into concubines, and goddesses into muses. And who can guess into what it will turn us, nymphs? Alabar felt a surge of beet-red temper. Violently, he shook his head. "The world is changing," he said, "but there will always be a place in it for you, and for Pan." And that's how he remembered it, with Hey Jude being played by the pan flute in the background with subpar accents in the memory bank. That's how it was. And then there was Typhon, the mutilization of Zeus, the escape to Egypt where all the gods turned themselves into animals. And he, in such a panic, only changed himself halfway into a fish. The escape was a success, though. Yet now, they are all just faded stories, nearly unreachable myths, constellations beyond the light pollution. The new stories have taken over. It's all been pandemonium, I suppose. But I think that many of us are sensing his fragrance these days. With the help of the Boneyard, that's Pluto, Saturn, South Node, soon to be Jupiter. I think that many of us are rewilding. We are returning to the wilds, to the pastures, rejecting the 21st century hollowed stories. We're tracking the scent in the hoofprints back into Kairos, back into the right time, the one where all the gods are still alive. But just barely. And I think holding on maybe by one of Pan's locks or his slippery tail. This is how it was gifted to me. This is the image of Pan as I record. There are mundane issues to consider, like talk of walls, fortification, getting ready for the long winter, that is with the time of Saturn and Capricorn. Naturally, you have the wall that the Red King is wanting to build between the United States and Mexico. You have Brexit, and many other expressions of how this is manifesting. As with the last ones, you have the building of the Berlin Wall and then the destruction of the Berlin Wall, both of which happened in times when Saturn was in Capricorn. There is also fear of recession. The connection between the roaring 20s into the stock market crash were these times with Saturn in Capricorn, or the roaring 90s into the Y2K-ness, the dot-com boom in real estate and everything like this, and the bubble popping, trade wars now, banks failing, and the currencies as well. Also times when Saturn was in Capricorn. That one was a little vague, but there is truth around it, right? That last time Saturn was in Capricorn, like we just said, was in the late 80s, early 90s. And sure, that wasn't the dot-com boom, but it was the beginning of something. Real estate beginning of something, and now here we are with the trade wars, banks failing, currencies as well. Enter Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. The strongest Capricorn signature I've seen in a chart in a long time is seen in the Bitcoin Genesis chart. It's a Capricorn sun, Mars, Pluto, Capricorn, Jupiter and Capricorn as well, all in the 6th house. And so the Boneyard, this great construction project, is being worked on in this chart. And if you track the space, you understand that that is exactly what is happening. The infrastructure is being built out for all of this. And it, in my opinion, will be the future of not just money, but it is a revolution of all of our technology. It's like an Internet 3.0. But really, we're not too terribly interested in the mundane here, as you know. We're more focused on the spirit and the steadfast construction project within. We're interested in hunting and gathering the materials needed for the archaic revival that just might give us a fighting chance. So, yeah, drilling inquisitive holes into heaven. I'm interested in that. And I'm not interested in the panic that is out there. And there's so much FUD, the frightened cries. Not interested. Instead, we must take in the whole panoramic scene with the handpans playing, with the shoes off, into the weird moon-drenched forest. And consider, well, if it's happening in your first house, like if you are a Capricorn rising, if Pan is on the rise, then he may be showing you something in your body that could be scaring you. So sculpt it while you construct your castle in the inner sky. If he's in your second house, your fears of not having enough money may be keeping you up at night. So get resourceful. Educate yourself about the future of money in crypto. Learn to forage. Learn to wildcraft. To make your own shoes and never steal them. If it's in your third house, if that's where Saturn is stepping, ideas may have floated into your neck of the woods that have begun to completely transform what you have thought of the world. Let them continue doing their work. Always think for yourself. If Saturn is at the bottom of your chart in the fourth house, your foundation might be quaking, the earth shaking, and panic seeping into you about where to go, what to do. Yes, home is where the heart is, but sometimes you just need to move, study maps, get into astrocartography, get a reading perhaps. If Saturn in Capricorn is in your fifth house, chiseling out the space in your life to create, well, it may be proving to be a challenge. Kids taking up all the time, students filling up much of it, yet it's all so perfect. Serve them deeply and keep trying to find that time. It's there. It's all we've got. If Saturn is in your sixth house, fears around your health could be haunting you. If it's true, keep up your disciplined approach to the issues. All you have learned and received will pay off eventually. The regenerative power of this transit is remarkable. If Saturn is in the house of love, if you are a Cancer rising person, relationships. What would we do without them? Yet, boy, are they hard. You know, you know this more than anybody right now. And whatever it is, divorce, a cheater, a liar, a perpetual power struggle, keep up the good work. You are polishing the mirrors so that you can see clearer. If Saturn is in your eighth house, regardless of how much you owe, as long as you are trying to get even, you are on the right path. Keep working on it, and someday you will be debt-free and fearless of the motions in the dark. If Saturn is in the ninth house, in Capricorn, it's one thing to have a vision. It's another to implement it into your life. Keep waking early, hitting the mat and the cushion. You are building the perfect temple, which is pointing into the heart of 10,000 great things. If Saturn is at the top of the chart, in your 10th house, sometimes the weight of the world can be backbreaking. Work too. But the gravity of the situation is probably slowly paying off. Keep climbing, and soon you will have the view you desire from that summit. And if Saturn is in your 11th, if you have yet to find your tribe, don't panic. They are out there. Just keep putting yourself out there. Go to a retreat. Join a Patreon if you resonate with one of them. Even if it starts digitally, it is a start. And finally, if Saturn is sliding through your 12th house, it is good to remember that all things must pass. All things fall apart. They do so because something else needs to be built. This is a time for dreaming. Trust the gods. Get to know Saturn. Satiate him with your continued praise and prayer. You will be rewarded. And so wherever Saturn is at, remember, he is attempting to connect with the past, to the ancestors, or to the marvelous construction sites where your temple is being built. That's where he's at. And it's our job to acknowledge him from time to time. So don't waste time. You can't buy time. Now is always the right time for a change. If you don't know what it is, just sit for a moment at the edge of this podcast, take a few big ones, and ask yourself, what is it I must do to make my situation in this life better? The first thought that appears is your answer. Don't be afraid to implement it immediately either, because who knows? After 10,000 hours of doing it, you'll be a different person because of it. Your world will have turned into a magnificent kingdom, and in 10,000 days, you will be completely unrecognizable to yourself. And so begin today. This was the first step in our attempt to fully understand the cathedral in Capricorn that is being built, and it's also my deepest prayer that it helped you in more ways than one. Again, stay tuned for the continuation of this story, where next month we will creep into the cellar door, then to the chthonic depths, and maybe find a Buddha where Pluto was supposed to be. If you enjoyed this show, again, open up your podcast app. If you got that new Catalina on your computer, you have a podcast app, and just open it up, find the show. Maybe you were listening to the show through your podcast app, and leave some stars and a review. It helps the podcast tremendously. It's not just an ego thing. It just helps the podcast get out to people, and it allows the algorithm gods to know that, like, people are listening. This is important. You can also leave a review as well if you were really into it. If you want to take it a step further and go deep in supporting the work and also being a part of the blooming community, if you have Saturn transiting your 11th house, maybe consider going to patreon.com/AdamSummer. And I recently just did a whole class on Saturn and Capricorn last Saturday, and that's there for all of you to watch as well. And if all of that, again, is too much weight to bear, just tell a friend about the show. That's how you create the weird world. This podcast, as all of the podcasts, is brought to you by Solar Fire. The days are near, and Saturn's clock is about to strike the hour when it's released on the Mac. And I hope it comes soon, because all of my programs, my astrology programs on my Mac, no longer work because of Catalina. God damn it. The whole thing with Apple, the conspiracy theory of them releasing new things when Mercury goes retrograde, is back in action. I observed this years ago, and then it kind of went out of sorts, and now it's back. And I did it. I couldn't help myself, even though it did speed up my computer. My astrology apps don't work anymore. And so use Soma on their site. That's alabe.com to get some solar fire into your life and take your astrology to the next level. This podcast is also brought to you by For Sigmatic. That's FOUR Sigmatic.com. This is how I've been taking it. I like bone broth. So whenever I make a chicken, I make a bone broth. And sometimes drinking mushroom elixirs can just be a bit much. So I just put the mushroom into the bone broth, and then I drink that up. And you know what? It's Saturn food. Saturn rules over bones. And when we drink up those bones, we get all that good collagen and other minerals and vitamins, and it's just wonderful when you add mushrooms in there too. And so if you want the highest quality double extracted mushrooms, go to foursigmatic.com, make Saturn happy, use promo code SOMA to get 10% off of any of their products. By the way, Solar Fire gives you 15. I don't know if I just mentioned that. Again, the Saturn class is available on my site. If you want to go on a Saturn journey with me, I don't have it as a product on my site, but it can be supplemented for any of the other planetary journeys that I do, and we can just talk about Saturn for the entirety of it. And so just go to holstoheavens.com, and that's where you sign up. And I am going to leave you with a song by John Craigie called Dissecting the Bird. He and I have a plan to meet up in Brighton, actually in January, in Capricorn times, just after his show. And I'm going to get to the bottom of this idea of Capricorn in retrograde, which is the name of one of his live albums that I highly recommend listening to. He's such a good storyteller. He's absolutely hilarious. And he's just got the good mixture of like serious folk music and hilarity. And the song I'm about to play, I think, is a good reminder. It's an amazing song. And if you like it, if you like all the music that I use, you can go to Spotify and there's a playlist for Holst to Heavens for you there. The music in the background and the music that was all over this podcast is by Ryan Teague. That's Teague. And just wonderful, down-tempo, experimental instrumentalist. I just discovered him. There he goes. And here's John Craigie. Thank you again for listening to the podcast. Sorry I wasn't able to share the song. YouTube is a bit more strict than the podcast apps. So if you'd like to listen to the whole show, go over to Spotify, the podcast app, SoundCloud, or really wherever podcasts are found. This is Tree Theater. Ciao.